ladies and gentlemen. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Montclair Planning Board. Notice that this meeting is published in the local paper and also posted in the lobby of this building. We are being streamed live on channel 34, and also on YouTube. This meeting is a quasi-judicial proceeding, meaning that we have powers and procedures resembling a court of law, and we are obligated to objectively determine facts and draw conclusions from them in order to form the basis of official action. Any questions or comments must be limited to those issues that the board may legally consider in reaching a decision, and the quorum appropriate to a judicial hearing must be maintained at all times. And I'm suffering from a cold and having difficulty talking and breathing at the same time, so you'll excuse me if I butcher my words. First up is our roll call.
Chair Wynn.
Here.
Vice Chair Brodock.
Here.
Mr. Schwartz.
Here.
Mr. Cook.
Here.
Councilor Schlager.
Here.
Ms. Willis. Mr. Rooney.
Here.
Mr. Ian Wally is excused. Ms. Lockman.
Here.
Mr. Barr.
Here.
Mr. Gilmer.
Here.
We have minutes from August 26th.
I've received comments from Mr. Ian Wally and Ms. Lockman, which I believe were distributed to the board prior to this evening's meeting. Are there any other changes to the minutes?
No change.
No changes, just on the note on calibrating what level of detail we provide. I just didn't know if we wanted to discuss that now or at a later time. I just know it was unresolved a little on whether we mentioned that the board made had a question or commented versus going back, 'cause it's been a couple months now we've done it that way, versus going back to the style where you note who has said what. I'm a bit agnostic, it just seemed unresolved.
Yeah, why did you switch?
Well,
Janice?
my understanding when we discussed it at the last meeting was not to mention names, but to summarize the comments, which was following Robert's Rules of Order.
Well, I feel like having people's names, it shows that there's been like a lively discussion and that you're not, the board is not a monolithic
I'm willing
group.
to do whatever
You
the
don't
board
care.
wants, but
Well-
I believe the way we left it was to summarize the comments of the public and to summarize the comments of the board members and not mention specific names,
Well, I
other
didn't
than
get
who
that.
made a motion.
I didn't get that from our discussion.
I did think that's where we had landed.
Mhm.
So I was surprised at the pushback, but I just wanted to make sure we had time to discuss it together. Because there were at least a couple, 2 or 3 folks that felt there should be more detail. I thought it had been fine being at the level that we had shifted to, but
It's not so much detail as naming the people who had the comment, so people know that this person spoke up and this is their point of view, and then that was countered perhaps by another person who said this. It's not like the board agreed and they all had the same opinion. There was a lively discussion about the issues at hand, and I think when you name the people who said whatever they said, that indicates that. And that's the way I've always seen minutes written, and that's the way we were doing it for years, and all of a sudden we've changed.
yeah, and I think we did change because there was a case where it had become very exhaustive and overly detailed and
Yes, that was
person A, B,
Lackawanna.
C. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we went, and that was
Um,
more with the resolution, I think, than it was in the actual minutes, because we were kind of referring to the resolution and
Right.
had put in a lot of detail about how many people from the public spoke and what they said, blah, 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 but we curtailed that in the final resolution.
Right. I don't feel strongly either way. If we'd want to go back to using names, I think that's fine. Would we prefer to do that?
Well, let me first ask, the minutes that we're talking about right now, do you have an issue with the way that they're set up?
No, I mean,
Okay.
I'm just talking about going forward in the future, and I was just wondering,
So-
I didn't recollect that the change had been made by the group.
So
Yeah.
let's do this. Let's go ahead and deal with these minutes this evening, and then let's set up some time aside from this and to have a better discussion to kind of sort it out how we'll do it in the future. All right?
Great.
So if there aren't any other issues with the minutes from any other board members, then I'll move to accept the minutes as as requested, as modified.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain.
Okay.
All right, and that brings us to the application of 37 Orange Road.
Mr. Chairman, before we begin this application, I'd like to say something. In my opinion, it's a disgrace that we're sitting here tonight considering a site plan that has a density level by right now that appears to give this applicant many more units per acre than what our Township Council intended in the redevelopment plan amendment, 72 it appears, by right, and not what this planning board recommended back to them after reviewing the council's proposed amended plan. Both we and the council seem to agree to only 18 units per acre, and that is not what we have to consider here this evening based on how our entire government has handled this application. Contrary to what I said when I brought this matter up originally, when I said that it was just a technical drafting misedit which has gotten us to this place, my understanding now, from talking to almost every counselor, is that there may have been some intentionality that caused this situation. Intentionality by an individual or individuals, and not just a drafting mistake, the result of which has distorted the will of our official decision-making bodies. I've been advised, it appears from the timing of online posts of the redevelopment plan amended drafts affecting the application, when the council was considering those amendments, that some improper actions may have taken place. Therefore, at least the appearance of an intentional effort to give this applicant more units than what the deciding bodies wanted. The results of this mishap may now be that hundreds of thousands of dollars in added value, if not millions, they are able to gain. But beyond that, my understanding is that the township manager was supposed to conduct a full investigation on this matter and then report back to the council what created this mishap. Apparently, to date, no such report was ever made back to councilors. Why not, Mr. Manager, is my question tonight. Where is the report to council on this matter? Because the result is the applicant has now been able to take advantage of the situation. They have gotten a drafting incongruity between the paragraph heading and the wording within the paragraph that impacts the number of units they seek, and they then rushed in their application to capitalize. Our council then apparently believed they were legally boxed in and did not make any further clarification and plan change. They let the matter go to the boards. And then the zoning board took the application and may have also been given incorrect information that they had to vote to agree to the higher units per acre because the council could have changed the plan at any point in time over the past 9 months, which was not correct. The council believed they were boxed in by a time of application rule and only had a brief period of time to correct this matter and didn't. So everyone acted, our official bodies acted appropriately, but by mishap, by change of venue, here we are. The applicant has gotten higher units per acre than appeared to be intended, and something is wrong. There should be an investigation, and we are now forced to deal with what the zoning board has passed, which was from, I believe, incorrect information. An investigation needs to be conducted, and let's proceed on.
And the opinion stated in this editorial represents the opinion of the speaker and not necessarily the opinion of the board.
Thank you for that clarification.
And with that, Counselor?
Excuse me, but with that, I don't understand, Martin has made a point, and are we just leaving it at that?
Yes, we are. And I think, and more precisely to your question, I'd like to talk to you about that off the record.
Okay.
And not on the record. I don't think it's appropriate.
I'm
not commenting. I mean, normally it's not a good idea to put a comment like that on record, but I understand Mr. Schwartz's reasoning. I think if this matter is ever reviewed in the future, it tells the court everything that Martin thinks has transpired up until now. And I think we have to respect the jurisdiction of the zoning board. The zoning board made an interpretation, and I agree with the last statement that Mr. Schwartz said, which was we're bound by what the zoning board decided. We can't act like an appellate body and disagree with the zoning board. That's not appropriate. And there are remedies. People can, someone out there could appeal the decision of the zoning board, or they could appeal this decision. Or as you're suggesting, if something's inappropriate, it can be investigated and something occur in a different form.
Indeed. Counselor?
Let the record reflect that Ms. Willis is here and the case hasn't really started yet. Just going to make you repeat it.
No, that's quite all right.
I had more, but I edited.
Carol can watch the tape.
We congratulate the editor.
So good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Tom Troutner. I'm an attorney from the law firm of Chiesa, Shahenian, and Giantomasi. I'm here on behalf of the applicant HP 37 Orange Road, Montclair LLC, which is a joint venture of the Hampshire companies and Pinnacle. And by way of continuation, we're back seeking our approval of our application for preliminary and final site plan approval with deviations for the construction of a mixed-use building that'll consist of 46 dwelling units on 3 floors above 1 floor of retail, consisting of approximately 2,300 square feet of retail space. As you'll hear in testimony, we're additionally proposing the construction of a publicly accessible plaza along Orange Road. And there is a garage proposed to accommodate approximately 67 vehicles on site currently, with any remaining required parking to be provided for in the Orange Road deck located in Block 1404, Lot 18, adjacent to our site. The property to which this application pertains is designated on the tax assessment map of the Township of Montclair as Block 1404, Lots 19 and 20, and we're located in the Montclair Center Gateway Phase 1 redevelopment area. We are seeking a number of deviations from the redevelopment plan, and one for sure, deviation from section 4.6.2, which requires that the lead assessment guidance and certification program be utilized to assess green rating for sustainability goals, and we're proposing to utilize Green Globes, which is a nationally recognized green rating assessment guidance and certification program instead of LEED. We had noticed for this evening, it's in our application, that we'd be seeking a deviation from section 4.6.3, which requires that at least 50% of the roof surface shall include solar panels, and an additional 25% of the roof area shall include green roofs or additional solar panels. We had proposed as part of our submission that solar panels for less than 50% of the roof surface, and further proposing less than 25% of the additional roof area include green roofs or additional solar panels. But as to that point, we've had some time to think about this. We've been delayed for about a year, so we're going to try and address this evening ability to maybe not have a deviation, or and that testimony will be addressed. We have a sustainability expert here, Mr. Glenn Haydu from Minnow and Wasco. Additionally, there's a deviation identified in the application with respect to parking spaces and the total number of parking. We're going to come back to you regarding parking, and towards that end, we have 2 witnesses tonight. We have Glenn Haydu, who I just mentioned, our sustainability expert. But before you hear from Mr. Haydu, you're going to hear from Mr. Stuart Johnson from Minnow and Wasco, our architect. I'll give you an overview of the site. Our Langen Engineering, our site civil engineer, unfortunately had a last-minute conflict, so we weren't able to have him come tonight. So we'll come back to you on engineering and on parking issues at the next available meeting. But all that being said, I'd ask to bring up Mr. Johnson from Minnow and Wasco, have him sworn in, and I'll seek to have him qualified and an expert in the field of architecture.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony about to give this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Kindly state your full name for the record, spell your last name.
Sure. Stuart Johnson, Johnsson.
Mr. Chairman, are you familiar with Mr. Johnson? You want a few credentials?
Be honest with you.
Thank you. To be honest with you, Mr. Johnson, there's been so many people before the board recently. If you can just
give us 3 boards which you've recently appeared before. Do not include Montclair.
Okay, sure. So again, Stuart Johnson, I'm a principal of Minnesota Law School Architects and Planners.
No, give us 3
Sure.
boards you've appeared before.
I've appeared before the zoning board in Westfield. I've appeared before the planning board in Bayonne, planning board in Jersey City, as well as over a dozen municipalities across the street.
And the last time you appeared before Montclair?
Last time I appeared before, this is the first time before the planning board, but I appeared before the historic preservation commission.
All right, we'll accept you.
Great.
Sorry, I was trying to give you a shortcut.
Sure. Oh, that's great.
Mr. Johnson, you're familiar with the site that's the subject of the tonight's application?
Yes, I am. So again, I was the architect of record, and I oversaw the development of the architectural drawings being considered by this board this evening.
Sure, and you're familiar with the requirements of the redevelopment plan that the site's subject to?
I am aware of the design standards and the requirements in the Gateway redevelopment plan Phase 1, yes.
So, if you could you please speak to the board regarding the subject property and
Sure.
how that
You know,
informs the
Mr.
development?
Troutner, did we ever read the exhibits into the record?
We have not, actually, so.
So maybe we should do, I did pass them out to all the board members.
Can we just move the exhibit list into the,
I've distributed to everybody. If you want to move the list into the record and we could all reference that, that would be great. Okay?
That works. Sure, and I just, as a matter of housekeeping, we have a PowerPoint presentation, which we would seek to mark the whole presentation as Exhibit A1, architectural PowerPoint.
no, we mark it in as Exhibit A31.
Oh, A31. I'm sorry,
A31.
You're close.
My slip.
Did I give you one?
Yeah.
So with that, so Exhibit A31 is going to be the architectural presentation this evening. Sheet A00, which is the first slide, shows a site, existing conditions aerial site plan.
Sorry, Mr. Johnson.
Sure.
Is that copy then? Do you have handouts?
We don't have handouts, but we'll provide you with a copy on your desktop afterwards. Sure.
Janice, isn't that what we have, and we're given in our packets?
Isn't this that?
Yeah.
This is the same. This is a
Yeah.
colorized version. There are a few additional slides that you'll see,
Oh, okay.
which are mostly illustrative perspective renderings that we've further developed of the project. But generally speaking, the building plans, the aerial site plan exhibits, as well as building elevations, are the exact same exhibits you have in your documents. So with that, that leads me into the presentation. So we're excited to be here in front of this board this evening to present this great project and great opportunity for a downtown redevelopment site. The subject parcel is approximately 0.64 acres, consists of 2 lots, so Lot 19 and Lot 20 of Block 1404. The site has frontage on Orange Road, which is approximately 66 feet wide. It also has frontage on Centro Verde Drive, which is approximately 14 feet wide. The site's present use is that of an auto body shop as well as a gas station. The adjacent parcel highlighted in white here, which is the newly constructed MC Hotel, was previously a Volvo auto shop dealership. So there was a series of uses here that really created a sort of disjointed planning opportunity, which was highlighted in the redevelopment plan. The adjacent parcels are the 8-story MC Hotel, the 6-story Orange Road deck, and the Valley and Bloom, the 6-story Valley and Bloom apartment building with ground floor retail located adjacent, directly adjacent, as well as the Board of Ed property across the street on Orange Road. The site is located within the downtown area, has direct proximity to that of mass transit, as well as steps from shops, retail, and dining within the downtown. So we really feel it's a great opportunity for a development site. In my opinion, it's the last puzzle piece of this block. Existing condition today there is a disjointed pedestrian connection or sidewalk. We have a few existing photographs that we'll share that show the existing sidewalk condition. So it's a unique opportunity to provide a connective pedestrian corridor along Orange Road and continuing to that of Central Verde along Bloomfield Avenue. And as highlighted earlier by Mr. Troutner, we're also providing a new plus or minus 3,000 square foot public plaza space in front of this building. The area highlighted here in red outlines the approximate sightline property. If we advance the slide.
Just before
here-
you move on,
Sure.
here, what's that, go back, please. What's the little thing on the left, upper left-hand corner, that kind of curvy thing? No, by the subject property.
It's like purple?
That thing,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, what is that?
That is that's the existing lot that's adjacent to our property. I believe that's lot 21.
The purple is lot 21, and above that, the
Yep.
curvy stuff, what's that? Yeah.
That's actually the landscape courtyard of the Valley and Bloom apartment
Oh,
building.
okay.
So my understanding is that there's parking below that on a one-story level. That's a one-level concrete podium, and then you have levels of residential above that. So that's amenitized plaza area. I believe the circles are hardscape. They have barbecue grills and seating area, passive recreation for that apartment building.
And is that the aerial of the MC Hotel, or is that a rendering dropped in?
This is an aerial, we use Google Earth, so this is an aerial, and we dropped in the approved building plan of the hotel.
Okay, thank you.
So with that, that leads us to some existing site imagery. The first image here is a view looking southeast. So again, you can see the intersection of Bloomfield and Orange Road. You can see the site of the MC Hotel, the development parcel beyond. View 2 is looking southwest, so you'll see the Valley and Bloom apartment building, the disjointed sidewalk condition here with the 2 redevelopment parcels. View 3 is looking northeast, so you'll see the Orange Road deck under construction, the intersection of Central Verde Drive, our development parcel being considered this evening. And lastly, view 4, which is a northwest view. You see Valley and Bloom apartment buildings here, the Central Verde Drive that splits the two, and then our development corner on the corner of Central Verde and Orange Road. With that leads us to a few images, which I believe were in Ms. Talley's report. These are a few different streetscape images that show the MC Hotel under construction. It shows the current use on the property, that of a gas station and an auto body shop. Again, you see that disjointed public sidewalk condition, where a sidewalk then narrows down from a 8 to 12 foot sidewalk to a 4 to 6 foot sidewalk, broken. There are various curb cuts along the frontage of this property, which are not conducive to that of a pedestrian-friendly streetscape. And lastly, you can see the Valley and Bloom apartment building. You can see the scale and mass of that building beyond, as well as the approximately 6-story Orange Road deck directly adjacent, just to give you a sense of scale and massing of the existing condition. Lastly, there are a few shots here looking up Central Verde Drive. Again, seeing some of the grading condition that is presently occurring. And view 3 here is really a great condition to get a sense of those multiple curb cuts and really, a unfriendly pedestrian area along Orange Road. So with that leads us to our proposed aerial site plan. The area highlighted here in green and tan is the proposed roof plan of our building. The area in green is the green roof area being proposed on our roof. There's a small amenitized roof deck, and the area highlighted in pink and gray represents that of the hardscape and the landscape area of the public plaza, which we'll look at in greater detail. But just to give you a sense of mass and scale, and showing you how that last puzzle piece fits in with the redevelopment of the downtown and really creating that connective corridor around that block. So with that leads us into sheet A10. This is an illustrative perspective view looking north along Orange Road. So we're proposing here a new mixed-use community that's a 4-story structure. There are 3 levels of residential being proposed over a ground level of parking and commercial retail. There's approximately 2,300 square feet of commercial retail space being proposed here on the corner of Central Verde and Orange Road Drive. You can see that being accented by the storefront glazing that wraps that corner. The ceiling heights in there are approximately 14 feet, so it's an opportunity to really activate and anchor that corner. We see that as the potential for a boutique food hall that could potentially pair with local vendors here found within the township, which again would offer an opportunity for seasonal cafe dining outside that space and help to activate that new public plaza space that we're presenting in front of the building. So compliant with the design standards and the bulk ordinance of the redevelopment plan, we're providing a minimum 15-foot setback from the property line to that of our building face. But because that property line is inset from that of the curb, that plaza space varies from 18 feet to 20-plus feet from curb to building face at different points. We're also providing a small drop-off area in front of that plaza space, which could be used for Uber or Lyft or short-term drop-off. The project as proposed is a 4-story development, as I previously stated. The building height is approximately 52 feet, where 55 feet is permitted. I had mentioned the 14-foot ceiling height at the retail space on the corner. The garage area would have a minimum ceiling height of 12.5 feet, and the typical levels of residential would each have a 9.5-foot nominal ceiling height, which allows for lots of light, window, and glazing. Typically, you'll see here minimally 2 pieces of glass or 3 pieces of glass for that of a bedroom, and 3 pieces of glass with an opportunity for some Juliet balconies and larger expanses of windows for the living room to really create a lot of light and air.
I just have a question for you.
Sure.
Is that a step back going up to the top floor, or is it just the way that you designed the facade of the first?
So there is a 12-inch step back.
12-inch,
So it's not
okay.
just a material difference. I believe that was a question that was asked at the, when we were before the Historic Preservation Committee. And not only is it a material change, there is a 12-inch differential between the plane of that wall, which we're creating with the structural wood framing that will allow for a reveal or a depth in plane, which really creates, again, complying with the design standards, a true base, middle, top reading to the building. You can see the varied building materials, which I'll get into a little bit later. So if I advance the slide here, this is a view looking west, and this is a tighter cropping that gives you a better picture of the public plaza being proposed here. So you see Centro Verde Drive in the foreground and Orange Road Drive here to the left of the image. Again, you see how this public plaza space is approximately 18 feet from the curb to the building face here, and then is deeper at the 2 sides. You can see the 14-foot ceiling height and expansive storefront glazing being proposed at the retail space. You can see the accent metal canopy being proposed here at the retail, where we're proposing some signage would be, and we're wrapping the underside of that with a composite wood panel to provide accent and contrast with some of the other building materials being proposed for the project. Advancing the slide, this is a detailed plan of the public plaza. So again, noting the property line is inset from that of the existing curve. So from the property line to the building, we have approximately 15.5 feet, complying with the minimum 15-foot setback. We have about 18 feet from these bollards to that of the building face. And then from the curb in these 2 areas, it's 20-plus feet. So we envision this really as an opportunity to create a gem of a public space that would really create an inviting and friendly pedestrian area at the corner of Centro Verde and Orange Road. With the public parking deck directly adjacent there, it really provides an area that pedestrians and residents could queue in front of the building. As previously noted, we are proposing an area here being delineated by the paving and the hardscape for outdoor seasonal cafe dining, which there's precedent for that here within the township. That would comply with, sure. It's okay. Good? Okay. The
Squirrel fell off the track.
So the area highlighted in red here is a brick paver. There's also a stamped concrete detail. We've also provided some continuous planters along the edge of our building to soften up that of the hardscape where it meets our residential building. I had noted the seasonal cafe dining. There's precedent for that found within the township that would comply with township ordinance in terms of use. The area highlighted in yellow is the main residential lobby, so you can see the vestibule being located here. The area highlighted in blue is that of the plus or minus 2,300 square feet of retail. If we advance the slide, so this is the ground floor plan, sheet A03. The ground floor plan of the building, as previously noted, houses the parking as well as the residential lobby and the retail. So as previously noted, there are approximately 67 parking spaces being provided on site, which is a combination of structured stacking parking spaces as well as that of surface spaces within the garage. We will have testimony by a parking consultant being provided at a later date in regards to the specific details of the stackers, the operation of that. We do expect that there would be a full-time valet attendant on site for this garage. We are providing a small valet office directly adjacent to the drive aisle. And again, we'll defer to our civil engineer. He shows areas on his drawings of where the queuing and stacking would occur and how that operation would occur with the valet. The area highlighted in gray is the back of house area for the project. So you can see a few mechanical rooms being located adjacent to the garage entry. Area in yellow was the residential lobby area. We envision that the lobby will be a boutique hotel style lobby that'll have taller ceilings and offer a package room as well as mail and Wi-Fi lounge space for the building residents. Directly adjacent to that, highlighted in blue, is the 2,300 square feet of retail space. We envision that the residential lobby as well as the retail space will have more or less continuous storefront glazing that wraps around that to help activate that streetscape, which again complies with that of the design standards in the redevelopment plan.
I just want to correct you one thing.
Sure.
You keep saying it expects. We're seeing a plan, so it's not going to expect, it's going to be.
True.
Okay.
These are concept drawings, they are illustrative drawings, but yes, this is what's being proposed and this is what's being considered for approval before the board, so I understand your comment. Yes. Yeah. Expect is,
On the proof. We
sure.
expect-
Expect is the wrong word. These are,
We expect you to
Sure.
deliver what you're showing.
understood.
The use of the word concept is in this.
Sure. So these are schematic drawings, and yes, what you're seeing and what's being represented in these exhibits is what we intend to build. It's what we intend to submit for a building permit at a later date.
Right, you're describing
Correct.
the quality of the building and how it's going to look.
Correct.
And if we grant the variances that are requested here, we're granting them in reliance on what you just showed us.
Correct, I agree with that.
Including how the building operates. So when you said you expect a full-time valet, what you're saying is there will be a full-time
There
valet.
will be a full-time valet attendant.
Beautiful.
Again, we'll have testimony at a later date by our parking consultant that will provide specific details of the operation of that. So with that being said, the areas in gray are mechanical. One point I'll note is that there is an internal refuse termination room for the project. So there will be a trash chute located, or access to a trash chute located on each level of the apartment building. Trash terminates internal to the building here in a refuse termination room where we have a trash compactor, an area that contain 2 to 3 additional 2 cubic yard rolling containers, as well as recycle bins. There is direct access to this refuse area from the retail via this back of house area here. And we envision that trash would come out curbside to a small loading zone that we have created on Centro Verde. It would be picked up by a private hauler 1 to 2 days a week, and again would comply with city ordinance in regards to hours of operation and how that operation would occur. But again, that's all being stored internal to the building and concealed from public view.
I have a question for you. Is that loading area intended for moving trucks when new people are moving into the building, or how does that work?
So the loading area along Central Verde Drive is designed for residential move-in as well as trash and refuse pickup. It's also intended for drop-off and loading service for the retail. We have provided a side entry here to the retail so that you could load stuff directly in. Move-in for the residential building is typically a scheduled, is a scheduled event. So this building is going to have a full-time management office and a leasing team. So that would be scheduled. Move-ins typically occur for 1 to 2 hours max. They're at set times, and again, that's a controlled operation.
But, so the moving truck parks in the loading zone, and how do they bring the furniture in?
So typical of other multifamily buildings found within the downtown and other areas, we would envision that the moving service would then move either in through the residential lobby, and you would utilize the elevators, or you would move furniture into the garage and have access to a double-sided elevator, which would be key controlled by building management, so that could only be used for move-in operations or building maintenance.
So they're moving your couch along the public park through the seating for the outdoor seating there, along in front of the lobby, and then in?
That's a
That seems like
common-
a little,
That's a common operation for many apartment buildings found within downtown areas.
okay.
So with that leads us to the second level of the building. So as previously stated, there are 46 apartment units being proposed, 5 of which would be affordable units. The unit mix breakdown, there are 16 studio units, 12 one-bedroom units, 17 two-bedroom units, and 1 three-bedroom unit being proposed. Specifically regarding the affordable units, there's 1 affordable one-bedroom unit, 3 two-bedroom affordable units, and 1 three-bedroom affordable unit. As previously mentioned, there are 67 parking spaces located internal to the building at the lower level. The area highlighted here in pink is a club room area. It's approximately 1,700 square feet. This is where we envision we would have a Wi-Fi lounge, a pool table, gaming space, but passive recreation internal to the building for the building residents. That space opens up onto a small passive courtyard space, where we envision, or where there will be a few small passive seating areas, as well as opportunity for outdoor grilling and cooking. Advancing the slide, this brings us to the third level of the building. So you can see how the upper levels of the building are a typical double-loaded corridor. Area in yellow is the residential corridor. You can see that the units generally stack from levels 2, 3, and 4. Again, there are a handful of studio units, 1-bedroom units, and 2-bedroom units on each floor. The building is fully accessible, and there's elevator access to each floor of the building. Sheet A06 brings us to the fourth level of the apartment building. And lastly, sheet A07 here brings us to the proposed roof deck. Compliant with the design standards of the redevelopment plan, we intend to comply with the 25% green area requirement, or green roof area. That area is being denoted by this green area and texture along the perimeter of the roof. The area highlighted in red, this red dashed area, represents that of the 10-foot setback requirement for potential solar and/or rooftop mechanical equipment. So again, we intend to comply with that. There's a recommendation to provide a active roof deck here, a area for passive recreation and use for the residential community. You can see the area highlighted here in this hatched area is intended as a paver area with built-in planters and tree balls. We envision, or we will have, outdoor kitchen, a few stainless steel barbecue grills up on this rooftop for residential use. And one point to note, my colleague Glenn Haydu, who's here this evening, who's the Director of Sustainability for our office, will provide further testimony regarding the solar panels and how we intend to comply with the design intent as noted in the redevelopment plan.
Just another question.
Sure.
What are those other square things?
These square things? or-
Yeah.
Yeah.
So these square things here that are labeled CU for condensing unit, these are the condensing units that are connected to each of the residential apartment units. So we're proposing 46 residential apartment units. There's typically one condensing unit for each apartment unit. Condensing unit is typically about 42 inches high. It's comparable to that found on a single-family residence. We've stepped those back from the roof edge, minimally 10 feet. They will not be visible from the public right-of-way or at the ground floor streetscape level, given that step back and given their height.
So those air conditioning condenser, when you say condenser?
Condensing units, they're air conditioning condensing
conditioning.
units that are meant for conditioning each residential apartment unit, yes.
Are they shielded in any way?
So, so again, the condensing units are approximately 42 inches high, and they're set back 10
Right.
feet from the roof edge. We do have a parapet on this building. We can look at the building elevations in a moment, but you will not see those.
How high is the
They're by
parapet?
hearing them.
So the parapet varies between 12 to 18 inches to 24 inches, but if you were to look at a streetscape section, you will not see a 42-inch high parapet that's set back 10 feet from the roof edge.
Yeah, well, you do realize, though, that you have, going west, the topography goes up, so you're actually looking at that, when you're going east, you're looking at that site from a higher elevation. So what's it going to look like from across the street? What's it going to look like from the houses, from the top floor of the houses that are located directly across the street?
Right. Well, we'd have to look at that site cross-section. Again, a typical residential house might be 35 feet to the roof.
Well, we're looking not at a typical residential
Okay.
house. We actually have houses that are across the
Sure.
street. So we would want to know exactly from those houses.
Right.
I would strongly recommend that we put some screening around.
Right. So we would agree to provide screening. There is a requirement within the redevelopment plan to provide screening. Often, in my architectural opinion, screening draws more attention to that of a condensing unit, but we would certainly be willing to provide screening around the condensing units being proposed for this rooftop.
I was concerned about noise.
Oh.
You have a lot of amassing of condenser units. How noisy are they going to be for the hotel next door and the buildings surrounding
Yeah.
it? And the people using, but I don't really care about them, but the people using the amenities on the roof.
It's outside of the area of my expertise, the decibel level that that this equipment would make. But again, there's plenty of precedent found within the downtown of Montclair, the adjacent 6-story Valley and Bloom apartment building. If we were to go back to the aerial site plan, you'll see the condensing units located on that apartment building. I'm not aware of too many complaints associated with the sound from that of the condensing units being proposed on a multifamily building.
And is that grass, the green? It's not
So
astroturf or
so the
something?
green area would be a vegetated tray
Something.
system. So it'd be
Live?
It'd be a live roof, yes,
Yeah.
correct.
And is there a way you could provide, or I direct this to Mr. Troutner, is there a way that you could provide some information on sound? Do you have anybody in the,
Yeah, I'm
Coming
gonna,
up?
again, our engineer's not here tonight, so we can speak to him, and if that's not gonna get it done, then obviously I understand where this is going. So we'll look at it.
thank you.
You don't know what the agreement is going to be, is going to be see them?
So the green roof would be a live roof. It'd be a vegetated tray system that's in line with what the design standards of the redevelopment plan are. I don't know the exact makeup of that.
Well, I guess we probably want more details, but you know in Valley and Bloom that they use seed very.
Right. I can't speak to that. I was not the architect of record on that, but we do have a landscape architect who could potentially provide additional detail on that at a later date. So
Are there road bids out there?
I envision that there would be a hose bib for maintenance, yes, that, we would provide.
Double check.
Sure.
If you're going to survive without a hose, then out.
There would have to be a hose bib. So we would design it, typically if we're providing an amenitized roof area up there, we would provide a hose bib so that you can wash that down and maintain that area as well. So there
Not
would
only-
be a hose bib.
Not only that, if you have barbecues out there, you might want something if there was a
Correct.
fire.
Correct.
Yeah.
And what did you say that red line was, the red dashed line?
So the red dashed line represents a 10-foot a setback from that of the roof edge. So again, you see some jogs there, but this dark gray line here represents that of the parapet, so the roof edge and there's a dimension string of 10 feet, so it represents a 10-foot setback inward from the roof edge.
And did you say something about mechanicals could not be in that area?
So there's a requirement for the solar panels are not, if solar panels are being provided, they're not allowed to be located within 10 feet of the roof edge. There's an additional requirement that states any rooftop mechanical equipment that's located within the first 10 feet would count towards your building height. But there's nothing in the redevelopment plan stating that rooftop mechanicals cannot be located within the first 10 feet.
Okay, so when you gave us the building height before, it was including that 40 however many inches of
When I gave you the building
mechanical?
height, that building height was to the roof deck. So it was
Okay.
measured from average grade to the roof deck, complying with the definition.
So it didn't include the mechanicals.
It did not include the mechanicals, but but we intend that all the rooftop mechanicals will be stepped back 10 feet from the roof edge.
Well, maybe I'm having a hard time seeing it from here, but it looks like there's condensing units within that 10-foot zone, especially to the north, frankly, and along the southwest
south,
side
also.
as well.
Right. So we have the flexibility to be able to relocate those condensing units.
Sure.
That we can move them out. That's a valid comment, but again, we intend that the roof height will, the building height will comply with that which is permitted, which is 55 feet. So again, I had stated that the proposed building height is approximately 52 feet to the roof deck. If any of those condensing units, as the project was engineered during a later phase, and those condensing units get specified by the mechanical engineer, we would locate those outside of that 10-foot setback so that we're compliant with the building height.
I would actually feel more comfortable if you submit a revised plan.
Yes.
Yeah,
I mean,
we'd be happy to submit a revised plan that shows the mechanical equipment that's outside that 10-foot setback, so that there's not any question in regards to what the building height might be.
Things slip through the cracks from time to time. I understand what you're saying, and
Right.
I think that's common in construction, but things seem to slip.
Sure,
And we'd be a lot more comfortable, I think, seeing it
sure.
the right way and compliant.
Yeah, that's not a problem, we can do that.
I have another question for you. So if you have solar panels, which you don't have in this drawing, then would you lose all your amenity space?
Again, I'm going to defer that testimony to my colleague who's here this evening.
So as usual, you've started predicting the future in terms of testimony we're going to present.
Okay.
In terms of, if I'm being blunt, you'll see there's an alternative that we're going to actually ask the board to look at and maybe even seek some advice or thoughts.
Guidance? Okay.
So with that, without any further ado, I would like to move into the building elevation. So.
Oh, actually, I'm sorry,
sure.
Mr. Johnson, two things. Just to
Sure.
clarify, in the event you didn't state, is there bicycle spaces being provided somewhere in the site plan?
There are. So on the ground floor of the building, we are providing 24 bicycle spaces, which are wall-mounted racks. That complies with the requirement in the redevelopment plan.
Another question. So the Centro Verde sidewalk, is that the same size as what exists there now, or is it a little wider?
I'm going to defer that testimony to our civil engineer.
Sorry.
Before we get into elevations, I
Sure.
want to get into some macro design issues. Is this the appropriate point to do that, or are you,
Do you want to
because you basically began your,
I mean, so we could take them now, or otherwise we actually could finish in terms of, he was going to walk through the architectural terms of the elevation to get a sense
well, he
of-
started with the overall design, so I'd like to, kind of, now that my colleagues have asked questions, I'd like to
Okay.
continue with that before we get to the elevations. Section 4.2 of the Gateway Plan, in discussing building massing, describes buildings that harmonize with the character of the Montclair Center and the adjacent Montclair Town Center Historic District, and buildings that will respect the overall pattern of downtown development by taking their cues from common themes evident throughout the various architectural styles visible in Montclair. Could you describe, for the record, how you believe this building design fits within that criteria?
I'd be happy to, but I would like respectfully to finish my presentation in regards to the building elevations, I think I'll answer some of your questions, and then I'd be happy to come back and address that specifically, that design standard of the redevelopment plan.
Okay.
So next, we were going to move into the building elevations, the exterior design being proposed for the building, what you see from the public right-of-way, that of Orange Road, as well as Centro Verde Drive. Sheet A09.1 represents that of the west elevation along Orange Road. It shows the approximate existing condition today. You can see the 8-story MC Hotel located here on the left-hand side of the drawing. You can see the existing 25-foot lot, which I believe is a plumbing warehouse or some sort of industrial use. You can see the existing lot 19 and 20 here, the gas station and the automotive use. Beyond that, you'll see the built 6-story Valley and Bloom apartment building beyond to get a sense of the mass and the scale. And lastly, on the right side of the plan, you'll see that of the 6-story Orange Road parking deck to get a sense of scale and massing. With that, this is the west elevation of the proposed 4-story massing for that of our project being considered. If I advance the slide to A9.3, this drops in the elevation of the adjacent parcel as well as that of the MC Hotel to get a sense of the scale. Sheet A09.4 drops in the 6-story Orange Road parking deck. And lastly, sheet A09.5 drops in the background. You can see the height of the 6-story Valley and Bloom apartment building behind our project. So as proposed here, the massing of the building and the project is stepping down to that of the scale of the Orange Road deck located immediately adjacent. So I feel architecturally that the scale and massing of this building fits with that of the existing adjacent Valley and Bloom apartment building and that which is found along Orange Road and Centro Verde Drive. Advancing the elevation here, or advancing the slide, this is sheet A09. So we see the full west elevation along Orange Road, and you also see the Centro Verde Drive elevation. So specifically regarding to the architecture, we've created a facade that is articulated both horizontally and vertically. The facade is being articulated through a series of box bays as well as various materials that are being used on this building. We've broken down the elements here to create a series of solids and voids, and there's a distinct pattern to the building with a true base metal top reading. The exterior building materials being proposed for the building consist of that of a manufactured cast stone veneer being used along the base of the building, and we're using a masonry brick veneer with some corbelling detail on levels 2 and 3 and bringing that up 4 stories on the corner of the building. The area that is highlighted here in the off-white color is a vertical fiber cement panel, which would be used with a reveal strip, not a batten strip, which was a recommendation in the Barton Ross letter, which we agree with. The exterior residential windows would be an aluminum-clad wood window, which matches that of recommendations found in the Barton Ross recommendation letter. The ground floor facade, we are proposing aluminum storefront windows at the residential lobby, as well as the retail space, which wraps the corner on Centro Verde Drive. Again, I provided a testimony and description earlier about how that will help to activate that public plaza space, and by turning that corner will help to continue that sense of safety and activation for the ground floor of that building. So as proposed here, there are true human scale elements being proposed at the base of this building. The box bays being used on the upper floors of the building are proposed to be composite metal panel, which again complies with a recommendation in the Barton Ross letter. The composite metal panel, in contrast to that of the masonry brick veneer and the other finishes on the elevation, provide for a contemporary contrast. And lastly, I did mention that we are using a composite wood cladding material in certain areas on the underside of the canopies to provide additional warmth to the facade.
So I have a question for you.
Sure.
You don't have a rear elevation, right? The back side of the building that is right next to Valley and Bloom apartments.
We do not have a rear elevation for the project to share with the board this evening, but it's my understanding that's not a requirement.
Well, it effectively is because of the description of the redevelopment plan in terms of what the rear of the building needs to look like in relationship to the front facade. So we will need to see that.
Okay.
And my understanding from looking at it is that you'll be pretty close to the apartment building behind it. And as you build up, you'll be covering up what exists are windows there now in that other building. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct. We will not be covering up any existing windows that are there.
Well, as you build up, you'll be blocking light from those windows, right?
The building steps back from the adjacent apartment building.
Well, that's why it'd be handy to see the rear elevation, because I don't quite get.
So if we come back to the typical residential plan, the ground floor of the building abuts the property line with approximately an 18-inch setback. But at the residential levels, we are stepping the building back from the adjacent property line. So it allows for us to have windows on the end elevations of our building. It doesn't interfere with the existing Valley and Bloom apartment building.
So how far in is your building from the property line? Did you just say 18 inches?
At the ground floor, the base of the building,
Yeah.
the parking garage is approximately 12 to 18 inches off of the property line. But again, there are no windows on that adjacent property as well. The ground floor use of the Valley and Bloom apartment building is also a parking garage or parking level.
Yeah, but I think the second and third floor up, there are
They
windows in
have
that side.
windows, and we
Yeah.
intend to step our building back. So
Okay.
again, we don't intend to interfere with the existing facade of that building. Those windows will remain in operation.
And get some sunlight.
They should get sunlight, yes.
So my other question was, you had mentioned there's a building there that, you said it was a plumbing office or something?
There's an adjacent parcel. I'm not sure what the exact use is, but it's some sort of industrial use.
And that's going to remain?
That's my understanding. That's not subject to this application being considered in front of the board this evening.
Wow, okay, thank you.
I have a question. There's a clear space between the deck and the residences, Central Verde Drive. So what is on the opposite end between the residence and the hotel? What is in that space?
It's about 25 feet wide. That's an existing parcel. I believe that's lot 21.
So it's empty?
It's not subject to the site plan application. It's the existing condition of what's there today. It's a one-story structure, I believe.
It's actually it's a adjacent property owner where it's not our property.
And that's shown on there?
Those little windows on the bottom?
It's being shown here. It's
Really?
It's an existing one-story structure. I believe there is a overhead garage door on the ground floor level and possibly a man door, and that's it. It's just a brick facade.
I never noticed.
It's set back from the street.
And what's in there?
Plumbing storage.
That's the plumbing store that you referred to?
Storage.
Storage?
Yes. You think it's part of the garage. It's his shop. It looks like it's part of the garage area.
Whose shop?
Section 4.3.1, the following materials are not appropriate in any location of the plan area. Materials with little or no precedent in Montclair Center, such as exposed concrete masonry units, ephes, bare or stained wood, faux treatments which mimic common materials, including imitation brick or stone facing, vinyl or asphalt siding, and sheet metal siding. Materials that age rapidly and are difficult to maintain, such as paint over shop finished metals. Are you aware of any materials being used that fall within the criteria within the plan of materials not to be used?
I'm not aware of any materials that we're proposing on these elevations that I provided testimony with tonight that are not permitted per the redevelopment plan.
So
In
in
fact,
your-
they're in line with the recommendations that we received from Barton Russ.
In
There
your
would be
material key, you note number 3, composite metal panel. Number 4, composite metal panel. Number 5, fiber cement siding panel. 6, fiber cement siding panel. 7, aluminum storefront windows. 8, vinyl windows. Do any of those materials fall within the materials in section 4.3.4.1 that are not allowed within the plan?
So it's my architectural opinion that none of the materials noted in our key plan, other than potentially the vinyl windows. But again, I provided testimony this evening that we intend to comply with Barton Ross's recommendation. We're going to use a aluminum-clad wood window for the residential units. We are not proposing any EIFS on this project. We're not proposing any exposed CMU blocks. We're proposing masonry brick veneer along the exterior face of the building. We are proposing a manufactured cast stone veneer. This is a quality building material. There's precedent for masonry brick veneer found within the downtown of Montclair. There's precedent of cast stone and cast stone detailing.
Where is that? Because you mentioned this relates to the materials of Valley and Bloom,
So there's precedent.
which
There's
many
precedent on the
people-
Valley and Bloom apartment
many
building.
people have take issue with as something we should not be doing.
I'm not trying to recommend that this design matches that. I'm just talking about materials.
Well, you gave direct testimony and said it related to what appeared on Valley and Bloom. You said that recently.
I'm sorry, I don't believe that was my statement, but the project being proposed and being considered in front of this board this evening, the project was designed to be complementary of that of the adjacent MC Hotel. We are branding this project as the MC Residences. We intend that this project would have comparable finishes to that of the 8-story MC Hotel, which recently had their ribbon cutting. In fact, the composite metal panel being proposed, the dark bronze color being shown on these box bays, as well as the canopy around the retail facade, matches that as the same Bamco or similar metal panel being used on that of the hotel adjacent. I believe that the brick veneer being proposed on the project is complementary to that of the brick selections on that project. And again, the vertical fiber cement siding panels that are being used here are typical building materials that can be found on residential apartment buildings, as well as projects found within the downtown. There was a recommendation to use a more expensive reveal trim detail as opposed to a batten panel. We're using a artificial wood grain. We're complying with that recommendation in Barton Ross's letter. So we're using a smooth vertical fiber cement siding panel.
Aren't
with-
those fiber cement siding panels the same that appear on the Valley and Bloom project?
They are different. So the fiber cement vertical siding panels proposed or constructed on the Valley and Bloom apartment building have the batten strips on them. These are also different colors than that which was constructed at the Valley and Bloom apartment building.
But isn't it the same effective look that one
It's
would find?
Architecturally, no, I disagree. I think it's a different look. There's a distinct difference between a hardy or a vertical fiber cement reveal system versus that of a hardy panel with a batten strip. It's two different architectural styles, and I think that's why Barton Ross, your professional, went to great length to make that point within their review letter.
How would you describe the difference?
So a batten is a raised batten that is typically
Why don't you explain what a
roof-fastened.
batten is for the purposes of those not familiar?
Sure. So a batten is a trim piece. It's a fiber cement trim piece that typically covers the seams, and it's a raised profile look that creates a shadow line.
It basically makes the panel look like it's framed, right?
It can make the panel look framed, yes. So typically, the panels or sheets are 4x8 or 4x10, and then they are cut to be installed or through fastened. And typically, these battens then give you a framed look. So
Okay.
with a reveal look, it's a more attractive and cleaner look. In my opinion, it's a more It's a more cleaner look for the facade.
But what's
and
the difference? You don't have the frame anymore?
You don't have the frame anymore. You have a reveal strip.
You have
It's an aluminum channel that is a reveal strip.
Is it flush to the panel, or is it raised?
It's revealed from the panel, so there's a inset channel.
So it looks like there's a seam,
Correct.
but the panel itself looks the same, so far as texture and
Correct.
such.
It's a smooth panel that's factory primed and finished, yes.
So that's what we're getting at. We've taken issue with the use of these panels as a body element, and use of metal panels, with the exception of trim use below or above windows as a detail, unless there's a raised or embossed element to it. Because when we've seen them used in big blocks, and you see them on the backside of the Montclairian 2 and on the Valley and Bloom project, they do not appear to be in keeping with the historic nature of downtown Montclair. In fact, they degrade the downtown, and that is basically I would say a pretty universal take on the exterior Valley and Bloom. And I think we have made that clear to applicants and this applicant that use of that material cheapens the downtown, if I can be so direct, and more natural facing materials should be used. Now, if you want to get into a revised situation where our revisions committee addresses the external details of the building and proceed on, but you're doing what we have, Mr. Chairman, I think mentioned many times that we took issue with in past applications and even in this plan. So
Let me ask you this, the buildings that you're drawing on for these elements, in stating that these elements are used elsewhere in the town, they're basically recent construction, right?
There are examples of composite, I would say recent construction in the past 10-plus years. I mean, there's examples of composite
But they're
metal
not
panel being used.
not the historic buildings in the town.
So
Right.
again, the composite metal panel,
Not the historic buildings in the town, right?
many aspects of the building
You're not
materials.
answering my question. That's a yes or no.
Please restate the question.
Not the historic buildings in the town. You're drawing from recent construction.
I disagree. Architecturally, I think there are
In
historical.
terms of the materials.
Again, professionally, I disagree. First of all, in my understanding, the site is not located in a historic site.
We're not asking and we're
Right.
not saying
So-
that. That wasn't my
The
question.
masonry.
That wasn't my question.
Okay.
Do historic buildings in the town use those fiber cement panels?
or metal panels.
I'm not aware of the historic list of buildings within the township and whether or not they have composite metal panel
Well,
and/or
you
fiber
said that
cement
you're
on them.
drawing the materials that you're using from other buildings that are in the town. Okay, so those
Correct
other
statement.
buildings in the town aren't historic buildings, are they?
I'm not aware of whether these buildings are on the historic
Well, you know
registry for
what,
the township.
you know what buildings you're drawing from, right? Yes or no?
Yes,
Those buildings are basically newer construction, right? Within the past 10 years, by your own words, right?
that's likely true.
Okay, then I think that's enough said.
I mean, would it be helpful to have a list or at least some photos of the buildings that you're using? I mean, I think that would help.
I
the
mean,
board.
that would help substantiate your disagreement, you know, with what it seems to me is what you're saying is that basically you're looking at the more recent construction, you're trying to match the hotel, and you're trying to match the Valley and Bloom project, none of which is historic, but those buildings were supposed to be drawing on historic factors, but they themselves aren't historic. You know, and I think the intent of the redevelopment plan was not to use the most recent construction buildings as your pattern, but to use the historic buildings that are in the town, to draw from those elements, to create something that's there. So that, and I think that's what
I'll read
Mr.
from 4.2 again, that harmonize with the character of the Montclair Center and the adjacent Montclair Town Center Historic District, by taking cues from common themes evident throughout the various architectural styles visible in Montclair. What you've testified to, sir, is that this relates to the Valley and Bloom project, and, as you just stated, other more recent construction. So there seems to be a conflict between the intent and what you are proposing, the material usage that you're proposing.
So that's a very interesting comment. What my testimony stated, for the record, and if I can go back, there are elements on the building here that resemble that of historic architecture and historic architectural elements found within the township. There are more contemporary building materials being proposed here, like that of the vertical fiber cement siding panel and the composite metal panel, which are mostly being used as accent. If you look at the facade here in front of us that fronts on Orange Road, the facade is predominantly that of masonry brick veneer and manufactured cast stone veneer on the base of the
Could you
building.
translate that to a percentage? You're
We
saying
can.
predominantly.
We can.
About how much would you say?
I'd rather, take a look at that and come back to the board and provide you those percentages. But I
Okay.
would say approximately of that Orange Road facade, it's 50% or more of masonry brick veneer with other accent materials being used.
And what about
again, I
what
believe
about
that we are
what about the
harmonizing-
Central Verde side? Same thing?
The same building materials are being used
No,
on the
more than
Central Verde.
50%?
I'd have to calculate the elevation
Okay.
to see what the building materials were.
Well,
But
then,
again,
I'd like you to do that.
Sure, we
You
can
come
do that.
back to us and let us know for the building and for the back, too, about what we're talking about, side by side.
So for the record, is it not less expensive to use fiber cement panels and metal paneling than more natural building materials?
Can you define more natural building materials?
Stucco, brick?
So in my opinion, stucco is comparable to that of EFIS and is.
But EFIS is not allowed.
I understand
We're talking
that.
about what you're using, the fiber cement panels and the metal paneling. Are not those materials less costly than using more natural building materials, which are found in older building materials, in older buildings throughout the downtown?
That depends on the material. You'd have to look at that on a material by material basis. But the fiber cement siding material is a quality building material that has a rain screen product behind it. It's typically used on residential multifamily apartment buildings. Again, it's in my architectural opinion that we are harmonizing with historic elements found within that of the downtown. I think architecturally, if you look at the facade and you look at the corbelling details that are being proposed on these masonry brick piers, creating this rhythm on the facade. And if you look at the detailing being proposed for the cast stone and the built-up cornice and these brick piers, again, these harken back to some of the architectural elements that can be found within the downtown area of not only Montclair, but the adjacent communities. So again, it's in my architectural opinion. And again, in reading Barton Ross's letter, your architectural consultant. It's of my opinion that we are complying with his recommendations, and I believe that we are meeting the design intent of the redevelopment plan.
Why did you choose fiber cement paneling and metal paneling as opposed to stone, stucco, natural stone, limestone, elements found on brick, elements found on older buildings? Why did you not choose those elements?
So again, the elements that were chosen to provide architectural variety and contrast. There are other sections of the redevelopment plan that specifically talk to that, creating a base middle top reading to the building, creating articulation.
We're just talking
Right.
about the materials here. I understand
Right.
the use of the articulation, the base, middle, and top. That I'm not into that. I'm asking you why you chose fiber cement paneling and metal panels as your building materials, as opposed to building materials found on the predominant older buildings throughout the township. Why didn't you match those?
So So, Mr. Schwartz, I can't speak as an architect. Obviously, I'm only speaking through the applicant. I think there was some intent to try and match a smoothness of a materiality between the hotel, at least from the applicant's perspective. But what I think I'm hearing is there's obviously perhaps a desire on behalf of some of the members of the board to explore whether stucco would be a better choice rather than fiber cement panels. We are certainly happy to have a conversation with Mr. Ross, and we are already coming back, obviously, on a couple of these issues to answer some questions that have been raised by the chairman and others on the board. I think we'd appreciate the opportunity to maybe speak to Mr. Ross and consider maybe making a different suggestion.
I wouldn't
Or
say
at
just
least-
stucco either.
Yeah, okay.
Before we move on, could you just mention how much of that first floor is retail versus how much of it is related to the other use of the building?
Sure. So there's approximately 2,300 square feet of space that is dedicated to commercial retail space. That's located here on the corner. So these storefront windows view into that of the retail space. The primary entrance is located on the corner with storefront glass that wraps the corner on Centro Verde, and there's a service access door that can access the space off of Centro Verde. Then these three bays being created here are storefront windows and entry doors that go into the primary residential vestibule that accesses the residential lobby.
So in terms of percent, it's about what?
So, 20 to 30% of that front facade is commercial retail space.
Thank you.
On the southwest corner there, the corner of Orange Road and Centro Verde, what do you call the architectural element at the very top there?
You're referring to the cornice here?
Yes.
So that's a cornice or canopy. So that's a extended cornice on the building. It's a built-up cornice that would be wrapped and clad in composite metal panel to match that being shown here on the canopies for contrast. Again, that complies with recommendations in Barton Ross's letter, as well as the design standards in the redevelopment plan to create architectural interest and tower elements on corners of buildings.
And so does that count towards the height of the building?
It does not. So the definition of building height excludes parapets. So building height's being measured to the highest point of the roof deck, and there's a certain amount of height permitted for parapets.
Okay. So is there any special limitations for that size or length, width, and height?
I believe it's approximately 48 inches measured from that of the roof deck, but I'd have to check that.
Okay, if you could.
Right.
Thank you.
And again, keep in mind that we're permitted 55 feet here, so that would technically be measured from the height of the permitted building height. You're allowed an additional 4 feet for parapet articulation, so you have to achieve a varied cornice line and look for the building.
I mean, it looks, just eyeballing it, looks, when I look at the elevation itself, not necessarily the rendering, it looks
Right.
higher than 4 feet to my eye.
We're going to come back to the board, so
Right.
we can, on our 2D elevations, this is a forced perspective. It's in the foreground. It may look a little larger, but when we come back to the board, we'd be happy to put a dimension string on that and show compliance with building height.
Thank you.
Sure.
I have another question about that cornice.
Sure.
Was that your only option that you considered, or did you look at any other variations of what you wanted to put on that tower to add some kind of architectural interest?
What you see is what we proposed. We looked at a few different options. We didn't want to overpower that corner, but we wanted to provide an architectural statement on that corner.
Yeah, it just seems to me every building that's being built now has one of those cornices, and it's getting old. If there was anything else that you had in mind that might be equally, attractive and different, that would be fine in my view. Something to look at would be nice, but
Sure. It's an appreciative comment.
we having a break? Any question? Okay, like 5 minutes or so.
Yeah.
So before I conclude the architectural presentation here, I'd like to talk about a couple items. One being that of the signage and the canopies being proposed. There was a recommendation by the Barton Ross letter and this was just a discussion at the HPC committee that seemed to be, there were varying opinions, but there was a recommendation to use fabric awnings at the retail storefront area. We chose to not do a fabric awning there. There was concern about long-term maintenance and about how that would look. Also, the retail space being proposed, or the commercial space being proposed, is approximately 2,300 square feet. So we feel that given the size of that, the fabric awnings actually can limit the amount of light that can get within that space. And we would like to have an open exposed ceiling and have a more open area. And as being proposed is a boutique food hall area with multiple vendors. So there's an opportunity to get additional light to infiltrate into that space without using those canopies. Additionally, we feel that the design that we're proposing here with this cantilevered composite metal panel banding to create that canopy creates an architectural interest, a feature element that again, I had noted that we're wrapping on the underside with composite wood panel for additional warmth and accent. But additionally, it gives you an area where we can do raised aluminum dimensional letters that could potentially be LED backlit as halo lighting that would be shielded. So I just wanted to provide that additional testimony to the board. And in regards to the signage, we are proposing signage for the residential entry, which again would be raised dimensional letters. We do have typical details that show they are approximately 18 inches in height, and the length would vary. We're also showing a similar dimensional aluminum letter for signage above the retail space. It's the applicant's intent that we would submit a full signage application at a later date to this board once we have a better idea of branding and marketing.
So Mr. Johnson, just to clarify, and this came up in Mr. Galvin's sort of comments, in this particular instance, what you're showing here is conceptual. This isn't necessarily what is going to ultimately be proposed. We would come back in a subsequent application with a signage application to the extent any deviations were required, depending on what was going to be proposed.
Right.
Yeah.
I just have a question again about where you're just talking about, that's an overhang, right? It's not flush against the building.
Correct.
Yeah.
It does project from the building.
How far out?
It's approximately 24 inches.
Oh, just 24 inches, 2 feet out? So you can't sit underneath that? It's hard to tell from the picture whether
Again,
it's
that's a
flush.
forced perspective there, and I believe there's a material difference between that of the cast stone veneer adjacent and the storefront glazing, which is pulled in. We're coming back to the board so I can provide you with that actual dimension of what the recess is. It's not intended to provide protection from the elements for the seasonal cafe dining.
Yeah, okay.
But it would create some shadow and some shade along the edge of the building
24
depending
inches.
on the time of day.
Yeah. And that's where the HPC said to put a canopy awning?
Well, there were recommendations for the storefront glazing for retail to use fabric awnings.
Okay, all right, thank you.
With respect to the sign package that's forthcoming, are you still requesting a variance for the 18-inch letters?
So we're actually not proposing that the board approve any signage at this time, so we're not actually asking for any deviations. However, I guess I would say as a bit of selfish interest, I guess if anybody hates what they're looking at, then we'll know not to come back with it. But
Fair enough. I just want to be clear, because when the way you said, well, if there's any changes, I want to know if it's changes from the ordinance or changes from what we're seeing here.
understood. Yeah.
But you also said it's going to be lit up, right? LED lighting?
Again,
Pardon me?
yeah,
I'm talking about, yeah.
the signage here doesn't count. This is conceptual and considered illustrative. We're going to come back to the board at a later date working with a signage consultant, will provide details, how it's going to be lit, if it's going to be lit, the materials, the dimensions, and exactly what it'll, be saying. So,
I actually, is there?
So lastly, to conclude my architectural testimony, there was one more item. We had met with Ms. Talley in a pre-application meeting. There is a requirement in the redevelopment plan to seek a LEED certification for this project. We had proposed to seek a Green Globes 2 certification, which my understanding was deemed acceptable by Mrs. Talley, or by Ms. Talley, and also is similar to other projects found within the township that have recently chose to seek a Green Globes 2 certification in place of a LEED certification. If there are additional questions regarding that, my colleague who's here this evening, Glenn Haydu, can provide additional comment. So that concludes my architectural testimony. I don't know if there are further questions. It sounded like we hit many of them as we went, but I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
No further questions from the applicant, but certainly from the board.
Any other questions from the board? All right. Are there questions from the public of this witness about how many people want to ask questions? Looks like it's just you, Mr. Scott. So why don't you come up? And then after Mr. Scott, if that's it for the questions for this witness, we'll take a break.
Okay. Good evening. William Scott, 23 Cedar Avenue. I'm also the co-chair of the Montclair Housing Commission and also the chair of the NAACP Housing Committee. Is it possible? Well, I just wanted to make a comment. I went and I took the time and I downloaded the application that's being reviewed tonight, and there are several slides that are being presented to you, the planning board, that are not in the package that was available for the public. So there's a bit of a disconnect as far as what information is available to the public. That is a concern, but we'll address that at some other point in time.
Well, I can say, Mr. Scott, what's available to the public, I don't get anything outside of what's available on the website. This PowerPoint, we don't have.
Okay.
They
Okay, well, that's my point. So, we'd like to be.
We're just seeing it for the first time, too, Mr.
Yes,
Scott.
Okay.
and I assume the applicant will provide us a copy.
We're going to provide a copy to Ms. Talley, and I assume it would be uploaded onto the website.
Okay, I would appreciate.
Some of these drawings are available in the packet, but they have been updated.
Okay.
And this PowerPoint is a combination of their drawings plus some pictures from Ms. Talley's report also.
Okay. And as long as we at some point in time get the updated version, that would be appreciated. I did try to follow along with some of the presentation as it related to, I believe it was A04, which is the second floor residential portion of the application. Matter of fact, it's going to be A04, A05, and A06 that I have some comments about. There's an indication.
Can I ask questions at this point?
Yes.
Comment.
It's not a comment, it is a question. Okay. The question being, what's being displayed on the drawings from an affordable housing standpoint represents 10% affordable housing set aside opposed to the 20%, which is the current town ordinance.
Let's stop there. What's the answer to that?
So the answer is the Montclair Center Gateway redevelopment plan requires a 10% affordable housing set aside, which is a standard which exists outside of the Montclair inclusionary zoning ordinance. It's an exception to it.
Okay. With that being your response, I did attend the November 2017 planning board meeting when this parcel of property was being considered from a redevelopment standpoint, and the conversation about the 18 units which was really what was set in stone at that point in time. Matter of fact, Mr. Broderick, you chaired that meeting at that time. I posed the question, if the density increased beyond the 18%, would we be pursuing the 20% affordable housing ordinance moving forward? And I was assured that the density wasn't going to be increased beyond the 18%, the 18 units. Now we have an increase of over 110%, And the applicant is indicating that they're only going to provide 10% affordable housing set aside when the current ordinance of the Township of Montclair states any new development, there will be a set aside for 20%. And are you asking for a variance at that point?
It's our legal position. We're not required to ask for a deviation or variance.
Mr. Scott, counsel can explain this, but the redevelopment plan supersedes the township standard zoning. Counsel, do you want to explain?
I agree. That's it. It just does.
Okay, well, Mr. Sports made a statement at the beginning of this application that was some serious concerns about the application. I will be questioning the township manager tomorrow when they have a council meeting in regards of this application. Anytime we have a situation to this level, I'm addressing it to the council, of 100+% increase in density, I don't believe the set-aside for affordable housing that was stated back in 2003 should remain at 10%. So we absolutely will be pursuing that from a Housing Commission standpoint. Very important that we understand that from a public standpoint. So we will be pursuing that. We need to get some answers as to why we would see an application of the increase in density of this magnitude and think that there would only be a 10% set aside. That's a question and a comment.
I'll let you go a little bit.
Okay.
All right, but you have to understand where we're at right now.
Yes, I
It's gone
understand.
to the zoning board. Zoning board made a ruling. It's come back here. We're faced with the law.
Okay.
We have to comply with the law, and the same thing with the number of units being set aside. So legal.
Well,
And the decision was made outside of this board. It was made by the council.
okay, and I understand that.
Disagree at some point, you go to court, maybe you
Mhm.
see it.
Okay. And-
Right now, we have to follow
Got
what
that.
the ordinance says and what the zoning board says.
Okay, and I did attend the zoning board meeting in regards to this application, and there was no public comment, and there was no discussion about the affordable housing set aside, for the record.
I understand.
Okay.
I don't think that that's incorrect. I don't think they acted, I don't think it's inappropriate for there not to be public comment when the zoning board's acting like a quasi-judicial body to make a legal determination.
Okay.
But
Okay, and then I just have one other question. You did indicate that the application has been reviewed by the Historical Preservation Commission. Has it been reviewed by the Economic Development Committee?
I don't think it has to.
No, the short answer is I'm.
Well, it's not a short answer, it's just yes or no.
Well,
Pretty short.
I don't know the answer in the absolute broadest sense, but in terms of the planning board process, there's no requirement to appear before the Economic Development Committee in conjunction with a review of the application submitted to the planning board.
Okay. And then was it reviewed, or was the Senior Citizen Advisory Committee involved in any conversation with this application?
Again, I can't speak to whether there's ever been any conversation between the applicant and that particular body, but it's not a requirement in conjunction with the site plan application to the planning board.
Okay. And then my just last part of that question, has it ever been reviewed with the Housing Commission of the Township of Montclair?
Again, I can't speak to whether or not anyone at the applicant has ever had a conversation with anyone on the Housing Commission, but again, it's not a requirement.
The only two advisory boards that you would normally expect a planning board application to go to would be environmental and historical.
If you're aware of the master plan, there is an early engagement paragraph in the master plan that talks about early engagement, and it does talk about the, at least the Senior Citizen Advisory Committee and also the Montclair Housing Commission. So that's why I posed that question. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Oh, let me make sure I got all my points covered. Yes, the opportunity to review the updated versions of this PowerPoint would be greatly appreciated for the public. Okay. All right. Thank you.
We have another question? Not from you, Mr. Scott, from,
I'm Esther Freeman at 30 Orange Road, directly across the street. This, I think, is my third meeting I've come to, and it's not clear of really what's going on. I'm walking around assuming that this building is being built. It's happening, so there's no say in that, and I'm not clear about that. Is there one, are we still like in meetings, or is it happening? I feel like it's just happening. And then if it's just happening, it's who do we go to about the construction part? Because we don't, like, there's no tax breaks or anything for us. We just lose serenity. And I still am cleaning up from the MC Hotel. Nobody's paying me for anything. I just had that frustration that even today I'm picking up the valet parking tickets. You know, I'm still like, and my neighbors are still like, but who do we go to? I've gone to Board of Ed, I've gone to many places, and now here we go, another, like, I don't know, 4 years, but I'm assuming it's being done. I don't know who to talk to about this part, that somebody has to come around and help us. Because I feel like I'm working, but I'm not getting paid.
All right, so to try and answer your question, yes, the building is going to be done. We're here discussing how it's going to be done. They're presenting their plan. There is a requirement, there's certain requirements in the redevelopment plan that they have to meet in order to proceed forward. So we're here to determine whether or not they're meeting those requirements. Your questions, though, with respect to the impact on your property, depending on what you're talking about, if you're talking about physical damage, then I would address that with the developer. If you're talking about the quality of life issues, the fact that there's debris from people who are using it, both residents and non-residents of the town, leaving litter and that kind of thing, that's something that I think you should address with the township in terms of policing and in terms of providing adequate facilities for disposal. And also the township may be able to also talk to the property owners about, making sure that people using the property aren't littering or impacting the quality of life for the residents. The planning board, all that we do here is basically we're adjudicating whether or not the plans that the developer would like to implement are meeting the requirements of the redevelopment plan. And that's the construction and design and the way that the building looks and how high it is and all of those sorts of details. We can't really we don't have the jurisdiction or the authority to deal with quality of life issues. So those are the kinds of things that you have to talk to your council persons about. You have to talk to the township manager about if there are noise complaints, if there are issues of that kind of thing, then you might want to talk to the police about that. If there are issues with impact on your property from the construction, like damage to your property and that kind of thing. Again, those are the kinds of things that, if it's caused by the developer, I would address it with the developer first to see if you can come to some sort of accord, and then if not, then to pursue it with the township.
So developer first and then township?
That's how I would do it. That's
Okay,
how
because
because the
it's a
developer may want to be a good neighbor and want to, make sure that, at least nothing that they're doing. It's hard for them to control valet parking tickets, people like that.
That's what it is today. I mean, before it's the construction.
Right.
Chairman, I think I might be able to help. I mean, I know that you've lived through the construction of the MC Hotel, which took an awful long time. But I think that perhaps Mr. Johnson can explain with the step, what's different with this application is the building is set back much further from the street. So I think construction-wise, it'll be different and they won't have to block the street for construction like the MC Hotel. If you can perhaps answer her question.
But they were using the street,
I
and
underst-
all the vendors that have to go in and out of the building are throwing their lunch and throwing the boxes of the materials that they're using to go into the building. That's my greatest concern.
Well, maybe they can answer, because this is a different building, and it might,
Which is even closer than the MC Hotel.
Right.
So my understanding is that the MC Hotel has approximately a 12-foot. So my understanding is that the MC Hotel. Here we go. So my understanding is that the MC Hotel has approximately a 12-foot sidewalk from building face to curb. Again, I was not the architect of record for that project. As proposed, we have a minimum 15-foot setback from the property line, which is inset from the curb by 10 to 15 feet. So I think there would be an opportunity with construction screening and staging that if construction screening was set at the curb line of the road, that they could stage on that interior, create scaffolding with protection for debris, et cetera. But again, as part of a building permit to the township at a later date, there would be action plans that would show that.
the neighbors won't have an opportunity at that point to have a
Right.
conversation.
So
about
what I can provide today to answer your question, Ms. Talley, is yes, the proposed building is set back greater than that of the constructed MC Hotel.
Anticipate that the street would have to be blocked off?
I don't know that question at this time. I'm sure at some point in the construction process, there may very well require a crane to lift building materials into this. But again, that would comply with a township ordinance, and the necessary permits would be filed.
In frame could be located on site, since you have 30 feet between, basically between the curb line.
That's outside there. That's really outside the area of my expertise. I'm a registered architect. I'm not a general contractor. But again, at a later date, if and when this project were to be approved by this board, prior to filing for building permit, there would likely be a construction, staging, and sequencing plan that would prove and show how that operation would occur.
And we can make an effort to make sure that the debris, whether it be lunch
I would agree
or
with that.
construction debris, stay on the site as opposed to spilling off the site.
Yeah, because I have the pictures, and this is actually directly across. MC Hotel is to the left. This is directly across. If we don't get to keep this parking space here, or here, I'm guaranteed. And so
Well,
wherever I gotta go, if I have to go.
talk to the applicants while they're here, get their
Okay.
contact information,
Okay.
and complain to them.
And sorry,
And that's a
I've
good-
been
that's a
stressed
good place
about
to
it, so I
start.
came here today because I didn't know, and I've reached out, and I don't get answers on this one.
Well, that's a good place to
So
start
thanks
with
for
that.
letting me share.
Okay. Any other questions of the witness concerning his testimony from the public? Mr. Scott, do you want another bite at the apple? All right.
William Scott again. This is just to correct the record. I think the presentation included a conversation about the current curb cuts on the property. The purpose of those curb cuts are to support the current gas station operation that's also available there.
Right.
And that's the reason why those curb cuts are so large. I just wanted to make sure that
I think we understand that.
Okay. Well, I didn't hear that in his testimony, so I just want to make sure we got that out there. And then the current storage building, that storage building used to be a former radiator repair shop many, many years ago. Obviously, the building is still there, but that was a functioning repair shop for auto repairs for radiators at that point in time.
Okay.
So that's what was there.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, we're going to take a 10-minute break. Martin should be back momentarily, but if you want to bring on your next witness, and we can get the preliminaries.
Sure. So we called Glenn Haydu from Minnow and Wasco, who I'll seek to qualify as an expert in the field of sustainable building design, including LEED and Green Globes design, but I'm sworn first.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
State your full name for the record, spell your last name.
Glenn Haydu, Haydu.
Go ahead, Mr. Conlon.
Sure. So, Mr. Haydu, if you could give the board, with the chairman's permission, a brief overview of your education, experience, and professional licenses.
Sure. So I'm currently a senior associate and a director of sustainable design for Minnow and Wasco Architects and Planners. I'm also a registered architect. I got registered in 1996. In addition to my architectural registration, I carry a number of licenses or certifications, including I'm a LEED building design and construction professional. I'm a Green Globes assessor, and I travel around the country certifying buildings to that standard. I'm also a National Green Building Standard Master Verifier, and a few others that I don't need to sort of bore you with. But it's definitely a focus of me personally, and that's my role in the firm, is to consult on sustainability issues.
Sure. Any more testimony?
No, I think we can accept yours.
And I have given testimony in front of other jurisdictions throughout New Jersey as well.
Go ahead, guys.
Great.
Let's go.
Thanks. So, Mr. Haydu, you're familiar with the subject site, correct?
Yes, I am.
And you're familiar with this project that's being testified to as part of this application?
Yes.
And you're familiar with the requirements of the redevelopment plan relating to the subject site in the project?
That's correct.
Okay. And have you evaluated the proposed project from the standpoint of sustainability requirements of the redevelopment plan?
Yes, I have.
And if you could give the board the benefit of your analysis.
Sure. So I really focused on section 4.6 of the redevelopment plan, which highlights sustainability, and it talks about having environmentally progressive projects. We're not proposing to deviate that in any way. We're just trying to find the best fit that fits for this project in this location and for an urban building in an urban setting. So the first of these two issues is the recognition of how we're going to achieve satisfaction for the board that we're achieving a sustainable building. So the redevelopment plan includes LEED as the one and only way to satisfy that requirement. There's many other programs that are out there, but Green Globes is one that's nationally recognized. It's currently one of only two programs that's recognized by the federal government for all of their projects. So you can either do a LEED or a Green Globes project. There's many municipalities throughout. There's many states that accept both as alternative paths to show compliance. In addition, the state of New Jersey accepts Green Globes as part of their high-performing buildings. So it's definitely a sustainable, recognizable, and very reputable program. Just a few sort of highlights. So both LEED and Green Globes.
Hold on, so
I'm sorry.
we'll mark this as a PowerPoint regarding sustainability at 8:32.
I just pulled out a few areas that both LEED and Green Globes focus on. So these are comprehensive programs. LEED has 5 categories that it covers in its program, and Green Globes has 7 programs. So those 7 include project management, the site, energy, water, emissions, materials and resources, and indoor environment. So it's not overlooking anything. If anything, it actually includes more topics than LEED. One other unique thing about the Green Globes program is there's the stage 1 assessment, which is similar to LEED, where that's a document review. But unlike LEED, it requires a stage 2 assessment where a third party comes out to inspect your building. So if we say we're going to do a 1.75 GPM shower head, somebody actually comes out to verify that. So it gives this third party substantiation to the goals of the redevelopment plan. So just moving on to the second item, which is the solar panels on the roof. So there's a requirement in the plan that 25% of the roof is covered with vegetated live green roof. As the plan's proposed, it's 26%. In order to make a residential building like this work, you need mechanical systems. As you saw, Mr. Johnson spoke about the condensing units. That's a very common way to condition apartments, and they take up a lot of roof area. The nice thing about them is they're low, and it provides individual control. So each apartment owner has a lot of control of their temperature, It's low scale, it tends to be low noise, low vibration, it's very appropriate for a residential building, but it does take up quite a bit of area. It's also recommended in the plan that there is an amenity roof for the residents. It's a great sort of outdoor space. That's recommended but not required, but we feel is a strong proponent of this design and something the residents in the town would like. So how do we get solar panels on here? Once we go in and we do that 10-foot setback, what this diagram is showing is the hatched area is what's left of the roof that allows for solar panels. So that takes our allowable roof from 17,000 square feet down to about 10,000 square feet. So we're already pretty close to 50%, and that's just doing 100% of that area solar panels. If we work around our current design, which we think is the best solution for the project, the areas in red show where we could actually put solar panels. It ends up being only, I think, about 15% of the project. So we like this solution, but we are here to propose some options for the board to consider. The blue line that we show here would meet the 50% requirement. In order to keep the mechanical systems, which again is a good solution because it doesn't require anything on the facade of the building, so you don't get any through-wall penetrations for P-tax or lower-cost HVAC systems. The bathrooms go up vertically, you don't do that through the sidewall. We would have to build these solar panels on a structure that would be about 8 to 10 feet in the air above the roof of the building. You see some images on the right where we just pulled that out. This we could do, we could meet the 50% requirement. We could do the 25% green roof, and we could even provide some rooftop amenity outside of that area. But we think that this would be not the visual look, especially when you're talking about concerns of people seeing this from a distance. So one alternative to this is what's called a renewable energy credit. So what's the goal of solar? The goal of solar is to produce renewable energy that goes into the grid. Solar panels generally have a life of about 20 years. And those solar panels are going to generate so much energy over that 20-year lifespan. What we're proposing to do is to purchase renewable energy credits, which are called RECs, and they're purchased off-site. So we would meet the demand that would be produced by these solar panels, but we would do it through a vehicle called RECs, which is recognized nationally, to buy that energy off-site. So we would buy wind power, we would buy solar power, equivalent to the solar panel system on the roof for 20 years. So we would buy 20 years worth of power that comes from renewables. Both LEED and Green Globes recognize renewable energy credits, and they award points in the system, but they only require a 40% purchase over 3 years. So to make a 20-year purchase is pretty substantial. We like this solution because it meets the goals of the redevelopment plan to provide renewable energy. It allows us to do the 25% green roof. It allows us to provide a rooftop amenity for the residents and keeps a very clean rooftop for the project. You can see the sort of little diagram. So generally you get fossil fuel, that's traditional generation that goes into the grid. Our solution is renewables. It could come from anywhere in the country and go into that grid. We would purchase it specifically for our project. It goes into the grid, and that's offsetting fossil fuel generation.
So just to clarify, so you'd be talking about, or we'd be talking about, instead of building 50% of the roof with solar panels and calculating how much megawatt power that those solar panels would generate in electricity that would be used over the course of 20 years, if the project were approved, we'd be talking about, I guess, on day one, purchasing the renewable energy credits for the total amount of all the power that would ever be generated by those solar panels, and that power would, that's power that actually goes into the grid. It's not just,
That's
counting,
correct.
right?
Renewable energy credits are typically a one-time purchase. You get a certificate. It tells you where the power is coming from. They're certified. They can only be sold once.
Is that just benefiting the owner of the building, or does it somehow benefit the renters in the building?
Well, the renewable energy credits benefits the national grid because we're providing power from a renewable energy source that goes into the national grid. So when you have power that comes to your home, that could be from a coal plant in West Virginia or anywhere else. So I think renewable energy credits is a broader contribution to the national grid. If you're thinking about solar panels wouldn't benefit any of the residents directly. they would only benefit the building owner by offsetting his utility bill.
Right.
Yeah. So in this case, it's generating that renewable power, which I think is the intent of the plan, without having to do it on this roof. That's a challenging roof. It's very small, it's broken up, it's really not an efficient system.
Need a little help with that,
Sure.
and understanding it. When a tenant turns on their light, the energy where does that come from, the energy for that? It's coming
in a
from the
regular
use- it's
building
coming from
or
the
how
regular
we're
grid, is it
proposing
not?
it?
Is it, no, I'm asking, you're saying that you're not going to have the panels, you're going to buy credits.
That's
but
correct. So those panels, they generally have about a 20-year lifespan. So if we were to put the panels on the roof, we had a solar company analyze it, that would generate 1,740 megawatt hours of power. That's over the life, the entire solar panels for 20 years, because that's all their effective life. So instead of it being generated on our roof, we would just buy that equivalent power that already exists or that's going to be built in the near future off-site.
But it's not coming from solar energy, it's coming from the.
It's either solar or wind. That's the way the RECs are purchased off-site. Now, the solar panels that are on the roof of the building, they wouldn't benefit the residents, and they wouldn't go to any of the residents' meters because we can only provide power to the building owner through those solar panels. And the solar panels are nowhere near enough to provide power for the entire building. This is a very small solar system as solar panel systems go in the commercial world.
And Glenn, if I can, maybe to go to Ms. Willis's question, or at least I think as I understood it, and maybe to try and to see if you can answer my question or maybe
Sure,
you can
no,
answer
it's
her question. So I think conceptually the question is, if you, let's imagine there's no solar panels on the roof, there was no requirement for anything. So then a unit owner or occupier or renter in the building, it turns on their lights, that's coming from the power grid. That power could be coming from a coal plant in West Virginia, it could be coming from anywhere, but nonetheless, it's a drain on fossil fuels.
Correct.
If you had solar panels on the roof, a certain percentage of when they turn the lights on over the years is going to come from the solar panels, a certain percentage is coming from fossil fuels somewhere else. By purchasing the renewable energy credit, the idea is maybe it's not directly the person turning on their light in the building, but somewhere in the country's national power grid, instead of a coal plant in West Virginia, by way of example, having to generate a certain amount of power by putting coal into a, I don't know if this is actually how they do it, into a machine. Instead, it's basically a certain amount of it has been funded by the renewable energy credit. So instead of the coal plant generating the electricity, instead it came from a renewable source.
That's
And
correct.
that's paid for. So
It's sometimes referred to as an offset, so that those renewable energy credits are offsetting fossil fuels, so.
yeah,
Just to correct that.
yeah, yeah. and-
Residents don't benefit from the solar,
Right,
which is,
yeah, the
you
solar.
had said they, you
yeah,
said they switched their light.
Yeah,
That's not happening.
Yeah, we can only tend it back to the 1 meter on the project, and that would be the building owner, if it was solar. So this is actually, as I tried to explain, a more broad contribution to the grid and, renewables as a whole.
Well, I guess what I was trying to get at, or to understand better, is how is this really discouraging coal? Because you're saying that if somebody has the solar energy that's out there, you're agreeing to be a customer for it, basically.
So it's adding demand for renewables. So all I'm saying is that the redevelopment plan encourages solar panels at 50% of our roof, and that would generate 1,740 megawatt hours. I don't think that's making a substantial change to coal plants and so forth, but what we're proposing is a 100% equivalent of renewable energy credits by purchasing them, which goes to new systems, that goes to existing systems. It's producing the same effect, in my opinion, as a sustainability expert.
What does it cost to purchase RECs?
It's an open market, so the costs vary.
About?
Generally 30, 60 days is how much they sort of change based on demand.
But about what? I mean, today, how much would 1,700?
I could put together some numbers
I'm
for you,
just
but
curious
it's
if you
not
know.
outrageous to purchase RECs.
Well, and it also depends on where you buy them from.
That's
And I was
correct.
going to suggest, since you're giving up a solar project here locally, would you consider buying the RECs from the PJM grid?
We would consider anything. I would say, yeah, let's go, I don't think we have to necessarily buy the cheapest RECs that are out there. I think we should come back with a reasonable solution of something that's in the area, sure.
I mean, I think it makes sense. So the PJM grid is what, Pennsylvania, Jersey, Maryland? Is that right?
I'm not,
I think that's correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
so basically what I'm saying for those who aren't in the energy grid area, if you're giving up one solar local sustainable project, you try and buy the RECs from, another nearby region, nearby locality, and that's PJM for us.
It reminds me of the parking sort of thing, where you say, well, I'm not going to provide parking, I'll buy it from somebody else. Somebody else can build the deck, and I promise to do it over there. It doesn't, you're not actually contributing to putting more electricity out there, but you're agreeing to let somebody else do it.
Well, you're encouraging somebody to develop that solar field in the middle of New Jersey, and so they spend, whatever their expense is, $1 million on a solar field. So they sell the RECs into the system, and if there's a buyer, well, then that person gets their money back for building that $1 million system, for instance.
I think I get how it works. Thank you.
yeah, I think there's not a tremendous prevalence of solar panels on urban projects. I think it's something that's trying to happen, but in mechanical, with multifamily buildings, if you look at these roofs, they tend to get covered with a fair amount of mechanical equipment if we don't put it through the wall, which I think is a much less attractive solution. So they become fairly inefficient, because you have to put an inverter and some other equipment up there to support those panels. So, and this building as a footprint is fairly small. We're 17,000 square feet total. If we did that 50%, we'd only be about 8,500 square feet.
So I have a question about the certificate of purchase.
Yes.
You say it's going to be for 30 years.
20 years.
20 years, okay.
Well, we buy the equivalent of 20 years of energy.
And that'll be reflected in the certificate?
Yes.
20 years?
That's
Okay.
correct. And I chose 20 years because that's generally the considered life of solar panels. The other fault with solar panels is they tend to degrade by 0.5% to 1% per year. So in year 15, those solar panels are really only generating probably 85 to 90% of their original energy. And at 20 years, many of them really just don't perform anymore. So that was kind of our decision. And we feel that we would actually exceed the production of the solar panel through the RECs as well.
And if you didn't do this to be compliant with the redevelopment plan, what would happen after 20 years when the solar panel effectiveness has diminished?
Well, the redevelopment plan doesn't address it, so my guess is they would either stay up there and be non-functioning shade structures, or they would be removed from the building.
Or we'd require you to replace them,
It's not currently in the redevelopment plan, but
but you're required to have solar panels.
You are. That's the odd part of this. Yeah, even with half-lives, it doesn't diminish efficacy. We don't need to get into the
yeah, I
math,
think
but
there's a lot of, there's 3 lines in here about what to do with solar. I felt that, the goal was to try and support renewable energy. And I think we're trying to do that in a way that's more effective for this project just because of its size and the limitations of multifamily. There's nothing about how efficient these panels need to be. I mean, in theory, they could buy panels that last 5 years. There's no criteria of what's, the generation. So if there is a future modification to redevelopment plans and so forth, you might want to be, a little bit more specific about that. But there are no guidelines, so.
And I think, and our thought process, I think, is, and it's sort of the oddity of the testimony, I guess I'll frame it this way, is that, so we're proposing an alternative, and we hadn't really thought through the question of replacing the panels, but I think the bigger question, I guess, in our mind is we can comply, as has been indicated, but we feel it's aesthetically unattractive and creates issues in terms of the recommended rooftop amenity space. So then we've come up with an alternative solution, and I guess I'm not asking for a straw poll, but it's sort of an idea of if the board has questions or if there's sort of a thought that maybe the board members have.
I have a question. What happens to the certification, whether it's Green Globe or LEED? After 20 years, your solar panels don't work.
Well, the points that are contributed to Green Globes or LEED is just at installation.
Just at installation.
Yeah, and the points that they award for Green Globes, you actually get, I think it's 18 points, which is pretty substantial in the program, to do a 40% offset of your energy use for 3 years. So they're only looking at very low initial.
Just a short term.
Yeah, and it's, again, they're just trying to motivate people to do this.
Right.
So all these projects or certifications are based on points. Green Globes is 1,000 points. You need to get to 55% of those
It's
to.
basically just a slice in time.
Correct.
Okay.
Fascinating.
Any other questions from the board?
So I guess I'm not as familiar with Green Globes as LEED. So you think they're comparable programs?
I do.
And what level of LEED, or Green Globes did you say was consistent with like a LEED Silver?
It's debatable, but the redevelopment plan only requires LEED certified.
Okay.
We've agreed to pursue 2 Green Globes to kind of even be a little bit above that, base threshold. So
So you would see 1 Green Globe equivalent to LEED certification?
Correct.
And so you're, in effect, proposing additional?
slightly higher performance, I would say yes.
Okay.
I have a question. I had to look out for a second
Sure.
to bring something up. Maybe I missed it. The panels that are on the photos, the one on the bottom, is that what this Green Globe panel would look like?
No, we have to meet 50% of the roof area to be solar. Because of the mechanical equipment, elevator, stair towers, things like that, we can't put these panels flat to the roof. There's just not enough area on the project to do it. So in order to do it, the only thing we could think of was to elevate these above the mechanical equipment. We need to give them proper ventilation, so they'd have to be about 8 to 10 feet in the air. We don't find that to be a very attractive solution for neighbors and not probably what the town wants to see. We were just, we can solve your 50% if this is what you want. We're just not sure that's the best way to provide renewable energy associated with the redevelopment plan.
So, yeah, so that's, to clarify, I guess the question is there we've noticed for and we'd seek a deviation from the requirement that 50% of the roof be covered with solar, but if that's not something that the board is amenable to, we can meet the 50% solar, but it'll require solar panels that are going to look something like that.
Well, wait a
That's
minute.
kinda
Wait a minute. You're telling me that that's the only configuration that you can put solar panels on that roof?
To get to 50%,
Yes.
the only solution that we could come up with, yes, because
That's with having the amenity space?
we've...
Yes or no?
Also the mechanical equipment.
The mechanical equipment
Yes.
and the amenity space?
That's
So if
correct.
you take the amenity space away, you can put the panels where the amenity space is, and they're not as obvious.
We could. We wouldn't be able to meet the 50%. We'd still have a shortfall.
By how much?
Stuart, do you know the number? Stuart helped me, or Mr. Johnson helped me prepare the graphics. I don't think it was even 25%, but we'll get you a number. There's also concern of shading that's created by mechanical units or a stair tower. But fortunately, most of the sun is coming from this direction, so we'd only have some shading issues. Oops.
Wouldn't you also have a height issue if you put solar panels that tall?
If they're set back 10 feet from the roof edge, nowhere could we find that they contribute to height. It does state that equipment associated with the solar panels would need to be screened. I interpreted that to be like the inverter, not the panels themselves. But that's our interpretation. So we don't believe it contributes to height from our review of the redevelopment plan. And screening would only be required for mechanical equipment.
And with that, you're also saying that that's the only configuration that you can have those, the condensers. Those are air conditioning condensers, right?
I mean, we can move them around, as Mr. Johnson has mentioned, especially to
Right.
make sure with inside the 10-foot setback.
Mhm.
The
'Cause
other
you have
alternative...
you have them in clusters now.
Right.
And if you just may
It's still
line
just a
them-
math problem. If you
Mhm.
look at, you need so much clearance between them for them to effectively operate, so they're not
Right.
discharging heat onto each other.
Sure, but I mean, the clusters that you have there, I mean, if you just put them in a line, made them in a straight line around, it looks like it would work. I'm just hypothesizing here. I'm just questioning the presentation that it's either 10-foot high towers of ugly solar panels or, buying solar panels, buying energy from another source. I don't buy it. Based on, what I'm seeing, the outline of the roof top, I would think that there would be some way that you could configure it, and particularly if you're not going over top of the inverters, you don't need 10 high towers. 10-foot high towers.
Sorry, the amenity area is 3,300 square feet. I can see that in here, so that does provide some amount of square footage. We'll get you exact numbers.
And the green roof is required also?
Green roof is required at 25%. That's
25% green roof.
And we have 26% currently.
Yeah.
Is the amenity space required?
It's recommended. So it's 25% green, 50% solar, and recommended amenity.
What's left?
I understand your presentation, but I just would like to have a realistic.
I think what we
realistic
I think what we
assessment.
need the answer to is if we completely eliminated the recommended amenity space, where does that leave us with solar?
Yeah.
Would the green space remain as well as the solar?
Yeah, and I think that has to.
Yeah.
And it's part of what we're wrestling with as a board, because there is a view that this is a way of purchasing your way out of compliance with what's been written in the redevelopment plan. So there really does need to be a very compelling case. And I do understand that the recs, buy into the market and do create demand and investment in renewable energy. That said, what would be generated from the solar panels on the roof, you've said, would not be particularly consequential to the grid. So I'm wrestling with the idea that the money you would spend to perhaps get this variance for this purchase of the recs would be incredibly consequential either. So we really do need a compelling case, so it doesn't seem at all like this is just a way to, buy your way out of complying.
Sure. Mr. Johnson provided it. If we were to take out the amenity roof area and work around the mechanical equipment, as it's shown now, we do have to take a little bit of that out based on what we talked about earlier with getting all the mechanical equipment within 10 feet. It's about 40%. That doesn't include any circulation or anything like that. That's 100% of the area. So you do need some small circulation paths between the panels and things like that. So maybe we could get 30% solar panels on this location. I just don't know personally why 1,740 megawatt hours of renewables purchased versus built on our building is any better, but that's...
Yeah, and I could be wrong in this. If you have solar panels on there 20 years from now, I'm not saying it's a certainty. I'm simply saying it's more likely that you would consider continuing with solar or replacing those than if you simply purchase the recs up front and never look back.
Who knows what 20 years is going to bring in that sort of marketplace.
Simply
So
a matter
I
of
think
likelihood.
solar panels...
You have solar panels on your roof, more likely than you haven't thought about them whatsoever in 20 years. That's all that I'm commenting on.
So, Mr.
And
Hayden-
technology is increasing, and I would figure in 20 years, what a solar panel is going to produce is a whole lot different than what it's producing now.
Mr. Haydu, so if I understood what you said, just so my edification, you're suggesting that if we were going to do, I don't think anybody's used these words yet, but flat solar panels on the roof, in other words, not elevated, by completely eliminating the amenity space on the roof, that we'd be getting to approximately 30% of the roof would be solar. So to actually get to 50, we're going to have to do some amount of, I guess, elevated solar panels. Is that your testimony?
That's correct.
Okay.
Or 30-40% and then purchase recs for the remainder of what would, I think that at that point that's a compromise that we could discuss. But we also don't really know the percentage, so it'd be good.
What I was going to suggest is we might need to take a look at this, because I think there was a suggestion by the chairman that what happens, or maybe others, Mr. Broderick, if you were to realign or reallocate the condensers as to what does that do or not do in terms of how this could be physically allocated. I guess I want to say maybe we should take a look at that.
Yeah, so it's just hard to discuss further without the actual numbers.
Yeah.
I know it's not 50%. It would be some shortfall, probably in the 25-30% range, somewhere around there. But yeah, we can produce an updated drawing. We've
Thank
obviously
you.
analyzed it quite a few ways to date.
How about if you eliminated some of the green space?
It doesn't affect the numbers.
It wouldn't affect putting more solar panels on there if you didn't have that green space?
No, because we only counted area within the 10-foot setback.
Okay.
So that's the big challenge. We start with a roof that's 17,000 square feet, and our interpretation is we have to do 50% of that area, not 50% of what's inside the 10-foot setback. So right off the bat, we're going from 17,000, and we only get 10,000 to work with. It's really that much setback takes out almost a third of the roof that's available to us.
I think the thought was that that setback area would be where the green roof would
Right.
be around the edges.
Right.
That was our
But
thought, preparing the plan.
Just to put stair tower up there and a few mechanical equipment, it's really challenging to meet that 50%.
I think what I would suggest is we're going to come back and I guess try to show a couple different, I don't know if it'll be a couple, but we'll show, I guess, answers to the questions that have been asked, and I guess figure out how we can answer some of these questions with precision.
You can see the grills on that outside.
And as part of, when you do this analysis, you also come back and give us some information on how you calculated the solar.
Sure.
Solar production.
Yeah, we discussed it, a couple of different options with one company that's been used by the developer in the past.
Okay.
Any other questions from the board?
I have a question, and it's probably not directed at you, but how's the building heated? We know where the compressors are,
It
but
looks
how's
like a
it
heat
heated?
pump solution to me. So it's essentially, it's an aquatherm system, so there's, heat pump.
So what is that? I don't know what an aquatherm.
So you are doing an aquatherm, gas fired?
We don't know.
No. Yes.
Well, part of my concern is introducing fresh air to the apartments, and we don't show any grills on the side of the building,
Yeah, natural ventilation is provided through operable windows.
just by windows.
Correct.
What is aquatherm? So no.
So aquatherm is a proprietary system, but essentially it's an oversized hot water heater, and the heat is a heat pump. The air conditioning is a traditional condenser located on the roof, but the oversized hot water heater that goes in the unit can either be gas fired or electric fired, or electric heated. You can also use the InstaHot wall hung units, and essentially there's a loop then and acts as a heat pump.
But
And that's a ducted system within the unit.
If it's not electric, you have to bring in fresh air to run it, right?
Well, again, we bring in fresh air through the operable windows on the building. That complies with the building code.
Well, not when you're using it for combustion. You have to have
So for
direct-
electric, there is no combustion. For
Right,
gas,
but I'm
there
saying
is.
for gas.
Right, and for gas, there would be, if we were through wall ventilating on the exterior of the building, there would be a pig snout. There would be a X vent. What we were recommending and stated what we would do is we would vent vertically to the roof of the building.
Okay.
So that goes into the factoring to have a better aesthetic on the exterior facades and not through wall penetrate and vent for the bathroom exhaust and the potential dryer exhaust and/or the pig snout that'll go in the exterior of the building. We're venting vertically to the roof. That additional area, as Mr. Haydu was saying, also takes up area on the roof space. So it's not just the condensing units.
Right,
There's
right.
there's various pipes and venting. When you look at the rooftops of these buildings, they're very intricate. As I know you're aware, Mr.
Sure.
Rooney.
Okay.
Other questions from the board? Other questions from the public? Well, you still have 20 minutes to start a new witness.
So, we'd actually like to end here.
Okay.
Come back, obviously. And we'll answer some of the questions raised during the architectural testimony, as well as the
All right.
sustainability testimony, and then, of course, bring forward our remaining witnesses.
All right. When are we next?
October 7th.
That work?
That works?
October 7th, no further notice required. And do we need extensions? If we do, then they're granted.
Yes.
Okay, October 7th. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything?
All right. Do we have any new business or committee reports that we need to look at?
I don't have anything to report. I don't know if anybody else has anything to report.
Bills?
I have a question. Did that zoning thing go before the council yet, where we were changing the
The one where you
required
recommended the
setback?
change, well, I believe
Yeah.
it's supposed to be approved tomorrow night. I've had discussions with the township attorney on how to address that change.
This is the 1,000 feet.
Yeah, yes,
Yeah,
yes,
okay.
yes.
Right.
And my last conversation with him was that they were going to approve the ordinance as introduced, and then immediately introduce an amendment to reflect what you've said. And then that amendment would be.
Which was 3 houses on both sides, or
Yes.
2?
So
Okay.
what we don't want will be approved, but it will be,
Okay,
the new
amended.
amendment will be introduced, and then it'll have the second reading at some point in the future. Okay.
Whatever.
That's what I've been told.
Okay.
So,
Get something in,
Okey-dokey.
1%.
So-
Do we have bills? Are they approved? Yeah.
motion
Our
to,
vice chair says that they're
Yeah,
approved.
motion to pay bills.
No?
is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
All right.
Okay,
Thank you, everybody.
all right. We'll see you at the next meeting in September 23rd.
Yeah, so, okay.
Somehow, I think, agreeing with.
Just to let you know.